Three, two, one. Hello. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whatever it might be, wherever you might be. I hope you're having a good one. Welcome to Saturday night. It's the first Hockey Primetime episode of the month of November, and we're very pleased to be with you. We've got two jam-packed hours ahead featuring some guests from around the hockey world that we're very excited to talk to and that we hope are going to be bringing some pretty spicy takes to the table as we set the table for what should be a exciting night of action in the National Hockey League. It's Saturday. We've already got one game in the books. You may have just been listening to coverage on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio of the Vegas Golden Knights in Ottawa to beat the Sens. Again, they scored 5 goals. Who are these guys? 9-4 on the season. 2 losses in a row going into that game, but they got the job done against the Ottawa Senators, who most of the time when they lose, they do it in overtime or a shootout. This was the exceptional game where they won it in regulation time. My name is Conor McKenna. Lost, I should say, in regulation time. My name is Conor McKenna. I'm the host of the show. I was off last week. A big thanks to Michelle Storino for filling in and doing a terrific job. At least that's what I heard. I was not able to tune in. I was in Houston going to game number 4. Yeah, game 4 of the World Series. And so anyway, it sounded like she did a great job. There was somebody who even said that they want her to replace me permanently, which is always a good sign. I saw that on the Twitter, so that's a nice thing.
It wasn't me, I swear.
That's right. That's Laura Saba. She's the producer of the show. So Hockey Primetime every Saturday from 5 to 7. And you can always go to our podcast page. Go to hockeyprimetime.com where you can listen to the show live, listen to the live stream of the show. You can also access old segments, old episodes on hockeyprimetime.com. So please take a look at that. And you can follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, etc. So the Montreal Canadiens, here we are in Montreal. This is the show comes to you live, and it's also on Facebook Live. So if you want to see the magic happen in the Hockey Primetime studio, you can watch us on Facebook Live. You can watch us on Periscope. Am I forgetting something? Is there another way? Facebook Live, Periscope. YouTube Live, of course.
And hockeyprimetime.com.
We're not Instagram living it?
Not yet.
Okay, no. Hockeyprimetime.com anyway, so you can find all the information there. So, yeah, we are here in Montreal. What a strange week for the Montreal Canadiens. Last Saturday, what did they do? They got the job done. They picked up a win, and they played on Monday night. They dummied the Ottawa Senators, the same sense as losing. Sorry, I'm getting distracted here. They lost on Monday night 8-3. So the worst offense in hockey put up 8 goals on you by the Minnesota Wild. The 6-3 scoreline was highly flattering to the visiting team. The Canadiens looked much worse than 6-3. And serious question marks, I think, are beginning to arise about the team that Marc Bergevin has built here. This is a team that just can't seem to do anything right. They can't kill penalties. They can't score on the power play. They get dominated at even strength very frequently. Most importantly, and perhaps most worryingly, they can't get a save. Carey Price cannot stop the puck right now. And it's gotten to the point where, we learned, okay, he's got a lower body injury. And they said, no, that's not why he looked the way he did against Minnesota the other night. But Price has been hurt. And he's also just played very badly. And they say that his poor play is not, the Canadians have said, his poor play is not a result of the injury that he's suffered. This is a team in Montreal that's got Carey Price as a Hart Trophy winner, Vezina Trophy winner, a guy who is widely regarded. I mean, you almost get sick of hearing it. Everybody's, he's the best goaltender in the world, best goalie in the world. He's not the best goalie in the world. It's been roughly a calendar year since you could honestly say he's the best goalie in the world. He's not. And he's not actually even probably one of the 50 best goalies in the world, the way things are going right now. And I got to say, I'm a little bit concerned about Carey Price, who's 30 years old. He has an 8-year extension that's going to be kicking in next summer. So his mega deal, $84 million mega deal, doesn't kick in until next year when he's going to be 31. And then you've got 8 years of Carey Price. Now, Carey Price has had good runs in the last year. Don't get me wrong. He's had his moments. And there are serious question marks, again, about the team in front of him, especially the blue line core that Marc Bergevin has put in front of him. Serious questions, no doubt. But you look at the scoring chances. He's, I think, got a 73% rate right now. He's stopping roughly 73% of high danger shots. And last year, I believe it was closer to 87%. So that's a big problem right there, right off the top. And if you have a D-line who's giving up more of those high danger chances this year because of the nature of this blue line, again, that Marc Bergevin put together. The rest of the NHL, I think, watched the playoffs last year, watched the Stanley Cup final and said, all right, we're going speed. We want guys that can move the puck and move their feet. Marc Bergevin was like, no, I want the blue line that resembles something that we saw in the dead puck era. Give me Carl Alzner. So we're seeing the results of that for sure. But Price's play is not because of Carl Alzner. It's not because of Claude Julien. Something appears to be wrong with Carey Price. And this is the second time this has happened in the last 9 months or so. 9 months ago, it was Carey Price in the lead up. This was, I guess it would have been in January and February of last year, of 2017, that led to Michel Therrien getting fired. And it led to some, and I remember saying it at the time, that, man, it's because Price just looked so wrong and different than he's ever looked before in that stretch. He was, he was the worst goalie in the NHL for a while last year. And finally, the coach got fired. And I remember saying at the time, I was like, man, it's going to be pretty fishy if he just starts playing well all of a sudden, now that Michel Therrien is gone. And, I mean, I kid you not. That's exactly what happened. He started playing well, and he looked completely fine as soon as Michel Therrien was gone. Now, granted, that did happen during the bye week, and who knows what he might have been working on and how the rest might have affected him. Could be all kinds of explanations. I don't mean to suggest that I know that Carey Price was deliberately not stopping the puck in order to get his coach fired. I mean, that's a hell of an accusation. I never want to make something and say something that's salacious, but it's an interesting thing to think about. It's a fun talk topic. You know what I mean? And now here we are. He's going again, and he's certainly not trying to get Claude Julien fired. If he is, he's not going to be able to succeed doing that, because Claude Julien is signed for a long time and has had the job for just 9 months. He's not going anywhere. But Carey Price right now, he can't make a save, and it's the second stretch in 9 months in which he has been not just poor, but really a goaltender who does not give his team a chance to win. And that kind of play in goal, you see the effect that has on a team, right? Teams defensively they know they can't count on their goalie, so it affects the way that they play. It affects the defense. It affects the forwards. It affects everybody in a highly negative way. And the reason I'm a little bit concerned is that this has now happened twice in 9 months. We saw it last year. We're seeing it again this year. And the fact is that it's a little bit, it's different. It's the same, but it's different, because last year the Canadiens never fell out of first place. They were in first place. Carey Price struggled, and they put so many points in the bank early in the season that they were able to have that dry stretch, that rough stretch from Carey Price, and not really miss a beat. I mean, they still ended up in a good position. They still ended up winning the division, which in retrospect may not have been the best thing to happen to the team, because they got the Rangers instead of what might have been an easier opponent in the first round of the playoffs. But that's neither here nor there. But here they are again, and now that it's at the beginning of the season, well, they're in last place. They've got the worst record in the Eastern Conference because they don't have those points in the bank. And that's why these things get amplified and magnified. So I think there's a lot more eyes, there's a lot more scrutiny, and there's a lot more worry about Carey Price right now. But to me, it feels like a carbon copy of the stretch of schedule that led to Michel Therrien losing his job a year ago. The difference is this time around, you've got a team that I think has the third largest, or I should say the third lowest cap hit of any team in the NHL. Again, that just sort of magnifies things and sort of puts a little bit more pressure on Marc Bergevin. What can Bergevin do? He tried. He had a trump card. His trump card was he addressed the team a couple of weeks ago in Anaheim, and it looked like it was a stroke of genius that his addressing the team, yes, they lost the next game against the Kings, but it required a performance that Jonathan Quick's coach, John Stevens, described as the greatest goaltending performance he'd ever seen. That's what John Stevens said about it. And Quick was amazing. And the Kings beat the Habs despite being outshot and outchanced because goaltending, because their goalie was bad, the Canadiens' goalie was bad, and the Kings' goalie was good. But they still played pretty well in that game. And then they went out last Saturday night, they won. And then they went out on Monday night and they won. So it looked like they were building something. Even though they lost to LA, there was 3 straight sort of good performances. And then Thursday night came around. So Marc Bergevin comes out and he says, it's I'm not making a trade. It's a message to the guys in the room. He comes out, he addresses the players, and they come out with a couple of performances, and then they come out with the performance that they had on Thursday night. So if you're Marc Bergevin, what do you have now? You have a goalie who can't make a save, whose 8-year contract is about to kick in next year. You have a bunch of cap space, which is useless essentially right now because there's nothing to be done with it. Someone was telling me the other day that if they keep this cap space, because you know how it grows as the season goes on, they'll have $32 million of cap space by the trade deadline. But here's the problem. Outside of draft picks, they don't have anything to trade. They don't have any prospects, or very few prospects that are really coveted by other organizations because they've done such a poor job of drafting and developing in the last 5 years. And they don't have, there's no teams out there that want to help them out. No general managers out there like, oh, Mark, yes, let me help you with your problems on the blue line. Let me help you make a move. Nobody's throwing him a life preserver. As the adage goes, everybody's going to try to throw him anchors. As popular as he may be around the National Hockey League, there are no friends when general managers are trying to make trades with one another. So I don't know. I don't know what Marc Bergevin has left as far as how he can play this and what he can do. It's going to be fascinating to see. Maybe they bounce back. They got a tough game tonight. Winnipeg's playing good hockey. Connor Hellebuck's making saves. It's always been the one question mark in Winnipeg, and they're getting saves right now. And they're not an easy team. They're never an easy team to go up against. They got a lot of firepower, and they've got some big boys. They got some heavy bodies. It's not going to be an easy game for Montreal. And then they go on the road and play Chicago. The good news is, even though they might lose both of these games, they've got 14 of their next 17 games at home. So might they turn it around by U.S. Thanksgiving? Well, that's a wait and see type situation. But it's a fascinating time to be keeping an eye on this team, and it's never boring watching the Montreal Canadiens, but I do wonder. You hear about waiting for the other shoe to drop. I don't know. I don't know what that means and what's going to happen. But I will be fascinated to know, and I'll be spending an inordinate amount of my life talking about it, win or lose. Coming up next, let's talk about the Philadelphia Flyers. Enough about the Habs. So let's look at the Philadelphia Flyers. Dave Isaacs with the South Jersey Courier-Post. What a great young blue line they've got there in Philly. How about Sean Couturier stepping into his role as a number 1 center? Nice work if you can get it with Jacob Voracek on one side, with Claude Giroux on the other. That's right, it's Claude. It's not Claude, it's Claude. I'm never going to stop. I'm never going to relent on this.
I'm feeling personally attacked right now.
You say Claude?
I have.
Are you American?
Called me out on it on the air.
It's not Claude. It's not Claude. But everybody says it. Everybody in Philly says it. Announcers say it. Writers say it. But that name is not pronounced Claude, at least not in my lifetime. So anyway, coming up next, let's talk to Dave Isaac about the Philadelphia Flyers, a young blue line, and a team on the rise. So that's coming up next. This is Hockey Primetime on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio, streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com, Facebook Live, Periscope, and YouTube Live.
Sets up shop in behind his own net. Snap it up the right wing to center. Tip free and skating in. Shin with a shot up high. Oh, a great glove save by Michael Neuvert as he takes that out of the top corner and robs his former teammate. Karenko jumps on the loose puck into the right wing circle. Turned it out to the left point. Winding. Back is Priority. Now thrown at the net in close corners. And Neuvert did well to close the pads and make that save.
3, 2, 1. Hello, good evening. This is Hockey Primetime on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio. My name is Conor McKenna. We're also streaming live on Periscope, Facebook Live, and other places. Follow us on Twitter at Hockey Primetime, or check out the Facebook page. Give us a like, and you can check us out there as well. Not only do we stream it live, but you can also watch it later if you don't have time, so you can check it out, see the magic happening here in the Hockey Primetime studio. Let's get this party started. The Philadelphia Flyers, nice-looking roster that they've got there, getting a little bit banged up there on the back end. But say this about the Flyers, the future looks extremely bright right now, regardless of what's going on in the present, which is competing in a very, very difficult division in which they're currently fifth. With more on the Flyers, Dave Isaac is on the beat from the South Jersey Courier-Post. Dave, welcome back to the show.
Connor, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure, as always. And I wanted to start with Sean Couturier, who's been he's been a very good player for the Flyers for a long time, and famously shut down Sidney Crosby in that playoff series years ago. And that was it. He was sort of, despite being a dominant offensive player in junior, he came up and on a team that was a little bit deep at center, turned into more of a shutdown guy. How cool has it been to see him emerge as sort of a number one centerman this year with some pretty good players on his line?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. He's been such a hot button issue in this town for the last couple of seasons because he had been the second line center and people didn't think that he could make the adjustment from being that shutdown guy to being a second line center in the NHL. Little did we know that's because he was a first line center all along. But I think that a lot of people would be if you had Claude Giroux and Jake Voracek on either wing. And it has been kind of cool because I think Sean Couturier, for a guy who came into the league in his draft year, has already played, I think, 7 seasons now.
Wow.
We're starting to see his personality, too, in addition to his scoring threat. So it is kind of the graduation of both a player and a person, it seems, here, and that part of it is pretty cool.
And such an unusual path, isn't it? I mean, it's crazy to think 7 seasons, because I remember going to Drummondville and watching this kid play. And I mean, he was a big boy. You could tell that he was going to be a player. And he was the kind of guy that at the junior level, even in his draft season, he had the ability to take hockey games over. I remember seeing him sort of single-handedly pick his team up. I think he scored 2 goals in the third period, sent it to overtime, scored again in overtime, and won the game. And so you knew that he was going to be that guy, but it is crazy. I mean, how often do you see that 7 years from being drafted to finally sort of living up to your offensive potential that many people felt he had at the time that the Flyers took him? I mean, it's a highly unusual path, isn't it?
Well, and adding to that unlikelihood of all this happening was the only reason that the Flyers got Couturier at number 8, I believe, overall, is because he had mononucleosis in his draft year and dropped. He was supposed to be a much higher pick, and he was also the first-round pick that the Flyers got from the Columbus Blue Jackets for Jeff Carter. So the fact that this offense is coming now kind of softens the blow of Jeff Carter and Mike Richards both going eventually to the Los Angeles Kings and winning those Stanley Cups after the Flyers. You know, their last trip there was 2010 with both of those players, and ended at the hands of the Chicago Blackhawks. So for them to kind of see a little bit more payoff from that trade all these years later, with Richards now out of the league and Carter still being a very good player, is something that the team can now kind of dip into and say that they were maybe thankful even more so now that they made the trade and that it did help their future. And
Claude Giroux's name, who you mentioned before, Dave, he's now a winger after spending the bulk of his NHL career as a center. How much has that sort of helped him taking the pressure of playing the center ice position? How much of a burden do you think has been sort of removed from him?
Well, it's really tough to know how much of the burden was playing center and how much of it was last year. He just wasn't very healthy. He had sports hernia surgery last summer, as did Shane Gostisbehere. Both of them had the same. Those surgeries are kind of like snowflakes, so no two are alike, but they both had the same surgery on the same day, and neither of them could really skate until February, early March. So they both clearly came on at the end of last season. It was very obvious that neither of them had their normal skating stride. But in terms of playing the center position, the way that the Flyers have their system, whoever is the first back checker is basically the center in the defensive zone. And because Couturier is a lefty shot and Giroux is a righty, he's still taking basically half the faceoffs anyway. So in terms of the center part of it, I don't know how much of an adjustment there really is. I think the bigger deal is that Claude Giroux finally feels like Claude Giroux.
And he's, as we mentioned, he's part of a great line here, the top scoring line in the NHL right now. 17 points for Couturier, 16 each for Giroux and Voracek. Best Flyers line since what, Dave? How far back do we have to go? I mean, I know it is only whatever it's been, 12 games or so, but are we talking like Legion of Doom status here?
Well, because of that sample size, I think we could go back at least to the 2010 playoffs when they had Danny Briere, Ville Laino, and Scott Hartnell, and that was a line that was just tremendous in the playoffs. So we're kind of talking around a similar sample size there. But in terms of a line that stayed together long enough, the next stop behind that line that was good in the playoffs 7 years ago probably is the Legion of Doom with Eric Lindros, John LeClair, and Michael Renberg. With
Dave Isaac of the South Jersey Courier Post talking Philadelphia Flyers. All right, let's move back to the blue line. We got to start with Ivan Provorov, who is, I mean, this guy's playing 29 minutes in games now, has really come through after being drafted in 2015. I don't know if he gets the credit he deserves even now, but how much fun has it been to watch this guy emerge into a premier top NHL defenseman?
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to Claude Giroux this morning about Provorov, and Giroux kind of likened him to Drew Doughty because he said, actually I have the file up right now. He said he reminds me a lot of Drew Doughty. His stats are not crazy, and he doesn't have a whole lot of goals and assists, but he's just so steady. So I think that's probably the biggest thing with Ivan Provorov is if you see him make a mistake, mark your calendar because it's not going to happen again for quite a while. He had last year being his rookie season, one really bad game that looked way worse on the score sheet than it did in person. He was a -5 against the Blackhawks in what I think ended up being a 7-3 final or something like that. But he is just so calm and steady, and you really do have to remind yourself that he's 20 years old. Because it's kind of amazing all the things that he can do. The other night playing like 40 seconds shy of half of the game, blocked 10 shots the last game, and that was a back-to-back, both of those games juxtaposed against one another. So it took him 20 games last year as a rookie for the Flyers to make him a #1 defenseman. And at the time, that might have seemed like more of an indictment on what else they had than it was praise for him. But I think when you watch him play, it should have been more praise for him than an indictment on anybody else. And with how decent, I wouldn't say great or even very good, the defense has been this year, I think even more so you would praise the player as opposed to taking away from the rest of the roster and what it looks like.
A lot of good young defensemen on that blue line. So Provorov is the top guy, a 7th overall draft pick. Who has been in the, let's say, the 25 and under crowd, who's been the second best defenseman?
Well, again, when you look at last year, how much the health took away from Shane Gostisbehere's game, I think people saw the way he was playing and assumed that it was a sophomore slump. And he's healthy again now. He actually missed the last 3 games, but he'll return to the lineup tonight after a head injury. He's been very good, even defensively. You remember his rookie year, he had a 15-game point streak, and everybody knew him for his offense. But he's been sneaky good defensively. He's got a very good stick this year and breaking up plays. Even on 2-on-1s, he's played the puck very well. He's a guy who's vastly improved his defensive game. And I think if you're looking for another guy, Robert Haig is one of the rookies on this squad who isn't exactly Provorov, but is a guy who hasn't made very many mistakes. And that's what won him a roster spot outright in training camp.
A 2nd-round pick back in 2013. Gostisbehere was a 3rd-round pick in 2012. You've got Travis Sanheim in the mix there, 1st-round pick 2014. This is a team that's done a really good job, it seems, especially recently when it comes to drafting defensemen. What can you tell me about the scouting strategy, the draft strategy? Who deserves credit for it? And I mean, at the same time, it's not just drafting guys; it's developing guys, which is the other half of the battle. What can you tell me about what the Flyers are doing there?
Yeah, it's not even that. It's also keeping the draft picks. I think that one of the big turning points in this franchise was getting Chris Pronger, which cost them a lot of draft picks. And then when Pronger had that career-ending injury, they spent more draft picks trying to replace him. So I think the biggest battle has been keeping those picks. The Flyers have done pretty well. They haven't had a lot of opportunity to pick in the top 10, although they have with Provorov and Couturier and most recently Nolan Patrick, but they've hit on some of those later first-round picks, and even guys in the second, third, fourth round. A guy like Oscar Lindblom, who was projected to make this team and was the last guy cut. But their scouting staff has kind of remained the same. They might have added another scout or two in Europe or in the junior ranks, but mostly this is the same staff. I think the biggest issue for them has been keeping hold of those draft picks.
And now they have Ron Hextall in charge and a little bit of stability. We don't have a ton of time left. What's going on with Patrick? That was a rough one, and what a difficult thing to see that kid have to go through. Have you heard any update on what his status is these days?
Yeah, so he's still on the injured reserve. I think there was kind of a thought process that maybe he would rejoin the lineup, if not tonight, then pretty soon. But the Flyers had a 2-game road trip in the middle of the week. He and Gostisbehere both stayed home. Gostisbehere, like I said, will return, but Patrick will not. He practiced in a no-contact jersey this morning and also left early. So certainly cause for concern there, because his last game was, I believe, October 24th. So it's been a little while now, and you always do worry when it comes to head injuries, and I believe that's the case. He got hit shoulder to shoulder by Anaheim's Chris Wagner, but his head bounced off the glass. So pretty clearly that's what the Flyers and Patrick are dealing with here. But you just hope for the best health for a guy who hasn't really had very good luck with his health over the last several years.
Flyers and Colorado Avalanche tonight, so a chance to see Nathan McKinnon on one side and the NHL's highest scoring line on the other with Couturier, Giroux, and Voracek. What is it? 4 multi-point games in his last 6 for Sean Couturier. So probably some fireworks tonight. Enjoy it, Dave. Thanks for making time for us here.
Thanks for having me.
That's Dave Isaac of the South Jersey Courier-Post. The Philadelphia Flyers are they're flying pretty high so far. Who's the leading scorer for the Colorado Avalanche? Anybody? Bueller? Mikko Rantanen. That's right. Everybody knew that, right? All right, coming up next, what are we doing? We're talking to Adam Gretz with the NHL and NBC Sports. The Penguins are out west on a road swing. Let's talk a little bit about them, how things are going for them so far. And how about the trade that wasn't in the NHL? The Senators in big time on Matt Duchene until everything fell apart there in what would have been a blockbuster 3-way trade. We'll give you the details next on Hockey Primetime here on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio and live at hockeyprimetime.com. 3, 2, 1. All right, welcome back. This is Hockey Primetime. Happy Saturday to you. If you're listening to our podcast page tomorrow, then I hope everything's okay in the future, and I hope you're having a good time at hockeyprimetime.com. You can follow us on Twitter. My name is Conor McKenna. It's at Hockey Primetime for our Twitter feed. I'm at McKenna Connor. Only one N in Connor, and Connor McDavid is screwing it up for all of us Connors who spell our name properly. The name is supposed to have just one N if it's a first name, if you're Irish, which he is. But now I get everybody spelling my name with two N's because of that guy. So thanks, Connor McDavid. Conor McGregor does it right. Connor McDavid screwed it up for all of us. All right, so what do we have going on here? Adam Gretz is on the line. He's joining us from the NHL and NBC Sports. Based out of Pittsburgh, we'll get to some Penguin stuff. And how about the trade that wasn't today in the NHL? So, Adam, welcome to the show. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. How you doing today, Connor? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you're welcome. And thank you for making time. I appreciate it very much. The Penguins are coming off a 2-1 loss to Calgary on Thursday. But I think one of the fascinating storylines with these Pittsburgh Penguins right now is these blowout score lines, which so far have all occurred in the second half of back-to-back situations. And unfortunately, the Penguins have more back-to-backs than any other team in the NHL. How do you account for? What do you think about the fact that they keep getting annihilated the day after playing?
Yeah, it's a little concerning, just because you don't usually see many teams, let alone a Stanley Cup contender, get blown out that many times in a month, no matter what the schedule looks like. I mean, they've lost 3 games this season by, I think, 7 or more goals already. We're only a month into the year. That's not what you're used to seeing from a team like that. And I think there's a few elements to it. I think number one, just this is a team that's played a lot of hockey the past 2 years, and they've had 2 straight deep playoff runs. Last season they had to play a couple game 7s along that way. Then you come into this season, you have all these back-to-backs. They were usually playing teams that were rested the night before while they were playing back-to-back, and they were playing some really good teams. Then you add in the fact that they were starting Antti Niemi in pretty much all of those games, and he just had a disastrous start in Pittsburgh. And I think it was just a perfect storm to just have a couple of these games just get away from them. And I still think the roster that they have right now probably isn't quite where they want it to be. I don't think that the team that's on the ice right now is going to be the one that you see go into the playoffs. So I think it's still a team that's just kind of shaking off, some of that, fatigue a little bit from playing so much hockey and having maybe a little bit of an unfavorable schedule to start and a backup goaltending situation that really just did not give them much of a chance to compete in some of those games. Yeah,
and I know Carey Price is thankful for Antti Niemi because Niemi remains the worst goalie in the National Hockey League. I mean, this guy putting out like an 82% save percentage. That was like the highest average I ever achieved in high school, which was fine. But like if you're an NHL goaltender, that's extremely bad. I mean, that's like almost like some historically bad goaltending from Niemi, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. And the Penguins had to know that they were not going to have the same luxury they had last season with Matt Murray and Marc-Andre Fleury, where you basically had 2 number 1 goaltenders, 2 goaltenders that are probably in the top half of the league. So when you didn't have one in the lineup for whatever reason, you still had a guy that was probably better than half of the starters in the league at worst. So they had to expect a little bit of a downgrade there, but I don't think they quite anticipated the bottom falling out for Niemi the way it did. I know he had struggled the past couple of years. He wasn't quite the goaltender he was when he was at his peak. And, you could see his game was starting to slide a little bit, but, this season it just seemed to fall off the cliff a little bit, and just was not a good situation. I'm a little surprised they did not give him a little bit more of a leash, but they had such a small investment in him that they had an opportunity to just cut their losses and go with a different option.
We're talking Adam Gretz, the NHL and NBC Sports, and I guess if there was and you mentioned some question marks when it comes to that roster for the Penguins. We know how much quality they have, and nobody needs to be reminded of that, especially when you talk about the top 6 But the bottom six is a little bit of a question mark for this team. And I know they tried to sort of shore it up by adding now Riley. I saw a video of him pronouncing his name. I think it was Shahan. Is it Shahan?
I believe it's Shahan. Yeah.
Shahan. So I had been saying it wrong for his entire career, which was at least a little bit disheartening. So what about that sort of those bottom six forwards? We've seen them win with quality like Matt Cullen and Nick Bonino and what those guys were able to bring to the table the last couple of years. How much are they missing that quality on the third and fourth line right now?
I think they're missing it a lot, because that quality on the third and fourth line was, I think, what separated the past two Penguins teams from the Penguins teams between 2010 and 2015 that were looked at as playoff disappointments, because the top guys are still the same. The top guys are still doing their thing. They're still going to put up more than a point per game. Kessel and Malkin and Crosby and Letang are going to be impact players. But what separated those past two teams was on the nights where maybe Crosby or Malkin got shut down a little bit, maybe they go through a little bit of a slump, you still had guys throughout your lineup that could pick up that slack a little bit. And, you had a guy like Matt Cullen skating on their fourth line that, he scored, I think, 15 goals last year. And you had a guy like Nick Bonino that just always seemed to come through in the playoffs for them and scored some huge goals. And even Chris Kunitz, who, even if, his game kind of, he's older. He's not the player he was a few years ago, but he was still a really good player for them that you could count on. And, he scored those two big goals in Game 7 for them. That's a lot of depth that they lost this offseason, and they really didn't do anything to replace it. The only addition they made forward-wise coming into the season was to bring in Ryan Reeves, who plays about 5 minutes a night, that isn't going to be a Nick Bonino or a Matt Cullen or a Chris Kunitz and be capable of scoring, 15 or 16 goals for you. I think at some point this season, you are going to see Daniel Sprong get called up from Wilkes-Barre, which I think you'll see him slide into maybe a top six winger role, which will push somebody else down to a third line role. That improves the depth a little bit. I still think you're going to see another trade someplace to address one of those center spots, because I really don't think Riley Shahan is the solution to what they're looking for there. So that's kind of why I said earlier, the team they have now, I don't expect to be the team that they go into the playoffs with, because I still think there's a couple things they can do.
We're talking to Adam Gretz from the NHL and NBC Sports. All right, let's shift away from this. I wanted to ask you about a couple of other things that are going on around the National Hockey League. The Vadim Shipachev saga is over, which I was disappointed about. It seemed kind of exciting that a guy who was so productive in Russia was going to be coming over to the National Hockey League, and it just flat out did not work out. And he ends his NHL career. He has officially retired. This was not too long ago that we heard about this. Well, what do you think, and what do you make of this saga, and why do you think it went so wrong?
I really don't know. It was all so bizarre because, he was their, in terms of free agency, he was probably their top addition. They made a pretty significant investment in that guy for a player that had never played in the NHL. You give him a 2-year contract for, what was it, I think, $8 or $9 million total. I mean, that's the type of investment you make in somebody that you count on to be one of your top players. And right from the very beginning, it just all seemed to not work. And the story coming from Vegas always seemed to change. Like at first, George McPhee said, "Oh, it's just a number situation. We have some guys that need to play or that are playing well." And then, I think it was like a week or two ago, he said, well, he hasn't really assimilated himself to the North American game, the smaller rink, the faster pace. And it just did not seem to work out at all for anybody. And I agree with you. I thought it was an intriguing move because you look at what he did in the KHL. He's one of the most productive players over there. And you look at a team starting from scratch that is literally building from the ground up. I think that's the type of gamble you can take. You can take that chance because you really have nothing to lose. And if he becomes a player for you, great. But it just did not work out for them. And very, very bizarre situation that it all fell apart within a month.
Exactly. And I mean, who'd have thought, right? They won again today. They beat the Sens, who are dealing with their own sort of turmoil right now with the fallout from the trade that wasn't, which I want to get to in a moment. But if you'd have told me that Vegas was going to go 9-4 in their first 13 games and Shipachev would be not only a non-factor, but would be retired by the time game 13 rolled around, I would have told you were crazy. I mean, it would have been unbelievable even with a Shipachev, but it's a crazy story, this start for Vegas, although they have lost 2 of their last 3 games. With Adam Gretz here.
It's even crazier when you consider that they're down to their 3rd and 4th string goalies right now.
Yes, exactly. Or even 5th by some measure, right? Because Pickard was let go too. So
they're down to their 5th goalie.
Yeah, it's amazing.
13 games in and they're still winning.
So they beat they beat Ottawa earlier today. The Sens almost came back. But what do you make of this report from earlier today? I love stuff like this. Would have been a little cooler if it happened, but we almost apparently had a blockbuster trade. The first place I saw it was Darren Dreger's Twitter account. Ottawa, Colorado, Nashville in discussions on a 3-way trade involving Matt Duchene. And I'm not sure if it was Elliot Friedman. I know that Elliot seemed to confirm it, that Kyle Turris was one of the principals involved. That's what I've seen anyway on Twitter. So Duchene, Turris, and something with Nashville. Now, talks have ended, according to Dreger, and no deal. But man, oh man, that would have been something, wouldn't it?
Oh, that would have been fascinating. And there's just so many elements to that. You look at it from the Ottawa perspective, and my question was, short term, how much better does that make them? Like, is Matt Duchene that much better than Kyle Turris? Because when you look at their production over the past 3, 4, 5 years, they are virtually identical in their goals, their assists, their points, their possession numbers. They are just virtually the same players. They are close to the same age. The only thing Ottawa really gets out of that is you have another year of term on Matt Duchene. So you're getting another year of that type of player, because Turris is a free agent after this year. Looks like they're going to have trouble signing him, so you at least get that. But then next season, you probably find yourself in the exact same situation with Matt Duchene, where you have a guy that's a pretty productive player, last year of his contract, got to figure out what you do with him. The team that I thought was really intriguing in that was really going to come out on top was the Nashville side, because you're adding a guy like Kyle Turris to that team. Well, I mean, you put another 25-goal, 60-point forward on that team with the players they already have. And it didn't sound like they were giving up anything of significance off of the current roster. If it would have happened, I would have seen them, as that trade was apparently reported, as being the big winner in that, because I would have seen them getting a big-time player without really giving up anything in return. And you just got to wonder, what Colorado is eventually going to do with this. I mean, they're off to a little bit of a better start than I think we probably would have anticipated. So it's still probably okay for now, but it just seems like that situation has to be resolved at some point, because they've been trying to do this for 2 years now. And it just, eventually everybody's got to be tired of it.
Crazy. Do we know what the principal that Nashville was including? Was it a pick or a prospect or a player? Do you know?
It sounded like from what I saw, it was just a bunch of picks and prospects.
Huh. Wow. All right. Hey, Adam, a pleasure as usual, man. I appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of the weekend.
Hey, thanks a lot. My pleasure. Anytime.
With the NHL and NBC Sports, that is Adam Gretz. Coming up next, let's talk to Ben Raby. He's covering the Washington Capitals, among other things, and he's got a new book out. If you're a Capitals fan or you have a Capitals fan in your life, pretty good Christmas gift idea. We'll talk to Ben about his book and the Capitals next on Hockey Primetime. right? How much fun is that? You know?
Ben is on the line. You'll have under 7 minutes with him.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. All right. It's the final segment of hour number 1. But maybe the one I was most looking forward to when I got the roster here from our producer, Laura Saba. Ben Raby is joining us. He is the host of the Washington Capitals radio network broadcasts, in addition to a variety of other roles. And he is also now the author of a book, 100 Things Every Caps Fan Needs to Know Before They Die. And great Christmas. It's a good Christmas gift idea if you're a Christmas person, if you're a Kwanzaa person. Also, good idea. Hanukkah, whatever it is. Or if you have a Caps fan in your life, not a bad idea to hook them up or hook yourself up if you are a Capitals fan. Ben, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Quite the introduction, Connor. I'm doing very well now. That's a nice boost right there. Thank you very much. I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. And thanks for making time for us here. So what's it like writing a book? I've never done it. I'm thinking about it, but I need an idea. But well, seriously, though, what was it like writing a book?
It was a lot of work. The joke I'm going with is my first book may have been my last. No, it was a lot of work. I tried to sell it to myself, Connor, that as a book of 100 entries, 100 things Caps fans should know and do before they die. I sold it to myself as, well, this is like writing 100 articles. And I write print articles and magazine articles. I figured writing this is like 100 articles. It's a little bit more than that, but it was a lot of work. So I will say that. That being said, a very rewarding experience, and learned a few things along the way, which was nice to do. Just as the hockey sports fan that I am, it's always nice to get a chance to speak to former players and members of management, et cetera, and find out a little bit of the behind the scenes goings on. So that was perhaps one of the more enjoyable parts of the experience.
And I would imagine at this point, I know that I'm not sure if you would say this about yourself, so I'll say it. I think that probably if you write a book like this, you can say that you're an expert on the history of the Washington Capitals, right? I mean, it's not too crazy, not too hyperbolic, but I'm saying it. You don't have to say it. But I mean, this was a team that was and I think you and I spoke about this at one point, but one of the worst, if not the worst, expansion teams in the history of expansion teams, like any sport, no?
Well, very timely that the Vegas Golden Knights today got over that hump with their 9th win of their inaugural season, which means the 74-75 Capitals, their 8 wins, that record of futility, it lives on. And we'll wait to see the next round of expansion in the NHL. But, yeah, the 74-75 Capitals were the worst expansion team, certainly in NHL history, 8 wins in 80 games. And they actually lost their first 37 road games. There was a very good chance they were going to go winless on the road, and not even ties. And keep in mind, this is when there wasn't even overtime. If you were tied at the end of 60 minutes, you got a point in the standings. It was a tie game. No, they lost their first 37 games on the road, and they finally won late in the season. They had a 3-game road trip, the traditional Oakland, Montreal, Detroit 3-game road trip.
Yes.
And, yeah, every team goes through that, right? So they knew that with the Montreal Forum on tap and with the game against the Detroit Red Wings at the old Olympia in Detroit, they had this game in Oakland circled. They have to win that night. If they didn't beat the the California Golden Seals, there was a good chance they were going 0 for 40. And they did win that game. It was, 10:30 Eastern start time. There were 3,000 and change at the old Coliseum in Oakland. In other words, they won this road game, but there are rumors that, nobody actually saw it happen, but they did win. They had their one road win. They were 1-4.
3 minutes.
On the road. It was a 40-game road schedule at the time. But, yeah, that first expansion team, they were pretty brutal and didn't turn around quickly. The Capitals missed the postseason their first 8 years in franchise history, and after that 8th season even came very close to folding altogether.
Wow. So, yeah, 8's like a magic number for this franchise. 8 wins in their inaugural season, 67 losses 8 years before making the playoffs. And, of course, the most iconic player I think we can now say in the history of the team is number 8, who got off to a flying start this year. You've got the Bruins tonight on the Capitals radio, Ben, and this is an interesting goaltending matchup. I saw you tweet to Braden Holtby's lifetime stats, 11-2 versus Boston in his career, 945 save percentage. Meanwhile, he's going up against a guy in Tuukka Rask, who's a hell of a goalie, but he cannot beat the Washington Capitals, can he?
No, he can't, and I don't have the numbers in front of me. Saw them this morning. I believe Rask is 1-8-5 lifetime against the Capitals, which makes sense when you consider Braden Holtby's winning record against the Bruins. You know, they usually are going up against each other, but overall right now, Capitals have won 9 in a row against Boston, a perfect 9-0-0 since Barry Trotz took over in fall 2014. So a lot of turnover, of course, with the Capitals since last season, so we'll see if that streak remains intact. But for whatever reason, if you even go back, Connor, to 2012, the Stanley Cup playoffs, that was sort of Braden Holtby's
90.
And when we say he has an 11-2 record against the Bruins, that doesn't even take into consideration the 7-game series when Holtby, as a rookie, came in and the Capitals pulled off an upset of the defending Stanley Cup champion Boston Bruins in 7 games. So a strong track record, if you will, for Braden Holtby and the Capitals going up against Boston. But as far as tonight's game, Connor, two very banged-up teams. I mean, the Capitals, we've been saying to start the season that they're dealing with the injury bug, but when you put it up against
one,
it's nothing compared to what Boston's going through. I mean, golly, the injuries they have there, 3 centers among others out of their lineup right now. They're chugging along, but should be good tonight.
Ben, thank you for your time. We appreciate it, man. Congrats on the new book, and let's catch up again soon.
Absolutely appreciate it, Connor. Thank you.
It's the Capitals and the Bruins, part of a busy Saturday night in the National Hockey League, and Ben will be a part of the broadcast on the Washington Capitals Radio Network. This is Hockey Primetime. My name is Conor McKenna. Spent years as host of the Montreal Canadiens Radio Network broadcast, but now I'm the host of Hockey Primetime. Amongst other things, please check out our podcast page, hockeyprimetime.com, at HPT Radio on the Twitter. Like us,
15.
Watch us on Facebook Live, and we'll be back on the other side. Emily Kaplan. How about this language barrier in the NHL? How does Artemi Panarin talk to Patrick Kane, for example? Emily Kaplan of ESPN will tell us next on Hockey Primetime.
Beautiful outside.
Babysitting her, and she first of all doesn't know what Facebook Live is or Periscope or anything. Maisie is blind and she's deaf, so every day is an adventure, but she's got a great attitude. She's a very, very nice girl, and she's staying with us this weekend. So anyway, say hi, Maisie. Hi, everybody.
She's so cute.
Go Astros. Oh yeah, she's an Astros fan too. All right, you can go now.
She's like, I have no idea what just happened.
She doesn't know where she is. What's going on?
She was just like comfy on the couch, and then all of a sudden
she
was flying through the air.
Yeah, she was just chilling on a pile of laundry there. But yeah, that's it. I mean, she's 12, and that's not a low couch that I have. She's 12 years old. She can't see. Right now she's just staring at a closet. But she got herself up on the couch. I give her credit for that.
It's kind of the life, though, like sleeping in a pile of laundry.
Yeah. And she smells just fine, which is what you need if you're a dog to get by. So she knows when the food is out, and she's always trying to get some of it. But yeah, you know what? Dog learn a lesson from dogs. So she's a pretty happy, nice girl. I mean, can you imagine if you were deaf and blind, what the effect that might have on your life? But she's got a great, I think, positive outlook. She's a good dog. So let's see here.
So Rob is now taking over, and they're having issues with clips, but we had only one. We only had I'd only asked for a Dallas clip, so we're just not going to have that one.
Okay, doesn't matter.
I don't know what's wrong with their system, as long as we're still.
It's not a significant thing for us at all. You know, as long as we're on the air, we're fine. Yeah, clips or whatever.
I find they enhance, but
1 minute.
they're more like a nice to have, right?
Look at her. Oh, Maisie, what are you doing? Hey, Maisie. Hey. All right. Jeez, what's this? Dun, dun, dun.
Emily's there, by the way.
Thank you. Three, 2, 1. Hello. Good evening. Welcome to hour number 2 of Hockey Primetime here on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio. We're also streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. Busy night in the National Hockey League. We've got one game in the books already. That was earlier today. The Vegas Golden Knights just keeping it going. And the Ottawa Senators, meanwhile, word gets out that they were close, apparently, to trading away one of the, I'd say, centerpiece players of their franchise right now, and trying to land Matt Duchene in return for Kyle Turris. The deal fell through, and the Sens fell to the Vegas Golden Knights earlier today. So the Knights are 9-4 on the season already, and Ottawa, they're in the middle of the pack in that Atlantic Division, probably the worst in the National Hockey League. How many games on tap? A whole ton, including a Toronto St. Louis is a 7 o'clock start, Montreal Winnipeg, Washington and Boston, Columbus Tampa, which might be the most tantalizing game if I'm looking at the 7 o'clock starts. Rangers at Florida, and the Avalanche are facing the Philadelphia Flyers of the best line in hockey right now. Right now, it is a pleasure to welcome back to the show from ESPN, covering the National Hockey League, the league at large, with some really cool stuff coming out in the last couple of weeks that I want to talk about with Emily Kaplan of ESPN. Hello, Emily.
Hey, Connor, how's it going?
I'm well, thanks. Thanks for making time for us here today. We appreciate it. Ahead of some exciting games tonight. The National Hockey League, if you're looking at the major pro sports, and I think, there are those among us who might suggest that it's a little bit unfair to put the NHL in the same category as the NBA, the NFL, et cetera. But it really does. Hockey does have this remarkable international flavor, which makes international hockey so exciting, right? I mean, listen, you want to watch an NFL tournament of USA against the world. It's not going to be a very good tournament, but a hockey tournament, it's the best for international, other than let's say soccer. So it's sort of a fascinating idea that you had to explore the language barriers that exist in NHL locker rooms. So where did the idea come from?
It literally began just me as a fan. As you know, this is my first year covering hockey. And when I used to watch the NHL, I always wondered, there's guys on the team that speak very little English. There's guys whose English is their second language. So how do they communicate, when they're on the ice? How do they talk smack to each other? And then that kind of delved into, okay, how do they interact in the locker room? And as I've been around NHL teams now for a couple months, I've seen it, and I've seen it play out when there's, two Russian guys in a corner just chatting and no one's really talking to them, or maybe there's a guy who's English is a second language in Russian, but is trying really hard to learn it, like Vladimir Tarasenko. So I started asking around to some hockey players, and I got some pretty interesting anecdotes.
Yeah, no kidding, including, I mean, there's a bunch of them there, and even some controversy there too. But how about Patrick Kane? Patrick Kane on communicating with Artemi Panarin. I mean, those guys were so electrifying when they played together. But Kane's explanation for how he talked to Panarin was fantastic, wasn't it?
I thought it was incredible. Yeah. So as everyone knows, Patrick Kane and Panarin had this incredibly chemistry for 2 years. but they can barely understand each other. Panarin, among the Russians, is known in the league as one whose English is, not getting there. They've hired translators for him in Chicago, and now, they're figuring out how to deal with it in Columbus. And Kane is a kid from Buffalo, New York, and he's like, yeah, when you're on the ice, stick taps and whatever. And I tried to talk to him. Panarin understands more English than he lets on, so he would try doing a fake Russian accent, and he thought that would help. I asked Artem Anisimov, who is kind of like the third man on the line and the conduit because he's Russian but speaks proficient English, and he's like, yeah, that didn't help at all. It really doesn't make it easier.
So you just
I don't know if Kane ever knows that, though.
So you just have Patrick Kane trying to speak English with a Russian accent to try to communicate with Artemi Panarin. But it's amazing, really. You talked about that chemistry that existed between the players. We saw here in Montreal in the offseason, the Canadiens acquired Jonathan Drouin, and all the talk was, oh, Drouin is hanging out with Pacioretty. Him and Pacioretty, they're buddies. It's going to be amazing to see them play together. And they played together, and it was terrible. They did not have it. And language certainly had nothing to do with it. It's with the chemistry thing. It's amazing how actually being able to communicate with each other in terms of language appears to be not really that important. It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, it turns on what you need to know on the ice. Like when I hear guys say, yeah, you hear chatter, but especially the guys where English is their second language, they're like, there's really 4 words you need to know. You need to know time, man on, over, maybe one other word, but that's really much it. So, if you don't speak English, you can play hockey and you can develop chemistry with another player even without saying a word.
The numbers that are fascinating in terms of the demographics of the National Hockey League. And you had a chance to talk to a lot of guys about this. I know Max Domi was one of them, and another one was Tyler Seguin. And this was something that this was how I first sort of heard about this article was, did you hear what Tyler Seguin said about speaking English? So I don't know. I guess I was, and I was maybe a little bit surprised that a bigger deal wasn't made about what Seguin said. Can you tell us what he said and your reaction when you heard him say it?
Yeah. So, and I'll be completely frank, and I maybe owe Tyler Seguin an apology because he's not the only player who has said this, and perhaps it was unfair that I singled out just his quote in this article. But he said pretty much, we're in North America, and you don't want a team of cliques. Just learn English, guys. And I get where he's coming from as a hockey player. He's saying we all want to get along. We don't want 2 Swedish players, in a corner just chatting and making everyone else feel left out. However, I think a large segment of our population got a bit offended by that and finds that, here's guys who come a long way from home and are just trying to make it work. And just to be, a little that blunt about it and saying, just fit in with us. Why don't you just fit in? It can seem a little cold. I know Tyler Seguin, someone who's very popular among his teammates. So I want to give him the benefit of the doubt here, but it was a pretty jarring comment.
And as you just said here, you heard that kind of stuff. He wasn't the only guy that you heard that kind of comment from, right?
He wasn't. There's at least 3 or 4. And I don't think they say it in like a crude or mean way.
Right.
It's more so of we just want to be one team and English is the common language. We're playing in North American League. This should be, the common theme of how we communicate with each other.
Which isn't a crazy thing to say. It's just, I wonder how much the political climate right now sort of has people's guards up about things like this, where something like that might fly under the radar a little bit more, even as recently as like a year ago. Today, it seems like, I don't know, it's like a bigger deal. Is there anything to that?
Yeah. I totally think so. I think, and especially when we're talking about Russian players, especially here in America with our current political climate, everyone kind of parses their words carefully, especially when I talk to Russian players. They're always so careful to say, make sure this doesn't become a big deal. Is that a big deal that I said that? I think everyone, as you and I have talked about many times, hockey players just want to stick to hockey. They don't want to show off too much personality, and they don't want to be divisive.
Yeah, so none of the American guys are yelling at the Russian players for hacking the DNC and sort of influencing the U.S. election, right?
Yeah, that's not that chatter that's going on in the locker room, no matter what language you're speaking in.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, so with Emily Kaplan of ESPN, there was another one, and I'm looking at the piece and I'm trying to find it here. But Braden Holtby had a pretty great line in it as well, didn't he?
Yeah, Braden said, look, we're not Hemingway out there. We're pretty much dumbing it down. We're like cavemen, really. And that was when he gave me that quote, it was me saying, how do you communicate to your defensemen, you know, especially if they're Swedish or Russian and don't speak much English? And he's like, look, it's literally like 4 words that I tell them. It's nothing eloquent. We're hockey players.
Right. We're not Hemingway out there. Hey, I mean, listen, it's still a Hemingway reference, right? I mean, there's something to that.
I have to say, Braden is probably one of the most well-read hockey players I've come across. He does his reading. So that wasn't a throwaway line by him.
With Emily Kaplan of ESPN, you can read her piece on language barriers and breaking them in the National Hockey League and in NHL locker rooms with quotes from a whole lot of star players. So how long does it take to put a piece like that together? Are you you're waiting for players to sort of come through and go into skates and talking to them? How exactly do you get that many different people from that many different teams?
So I looked at with that, a large part of that reporting was done actually before the season at NHL Media Days, where I was in New York, and the players just came to me, and I gathered a bunch of string. But after that, you know, you wanted more voices and not just who was there. So, for example, I had to go, this is actually pretty funny, because Kane gave me that quote. So in the preseason, I had to go to Panarin, and I had to confirm it. Like, I didn't want to just go off of Patrick Kane's word. So I had a pretty funny conversation with Artemi Panarin where I know exactly he understood me, but we had to go back and forth, and I relayed the story, and I said, is this accurate? And he said it was accurate. I just didn't feel comfortable quoting him because he was not using a translator. So then I got that. Then I had to come back to Chicago and get the Nisimov's voice in there. So it does take some time with these kind of stories, and my strategy is always I'm based here in Chicago, and I kind of just wait for the teams who come in and they're visiting locker rooms, and that's how I get a lot of strings. So I'm lucky that, you know, every team has to come through here at least once.
And now on Halloween, you had your piece go up about Conor McDavid, Emily, that we know there's no question that Conor McDavid is very, very good at hockey, but really bad at, and I'm going to say spelling his first name since he has 2 N's in the name Conor, although that's more his parents' fault. Then
it's a little biased there, but okay.
But but it's true. It's like the Irish spelling of the name as a first name. I'm telling you, it's 1 N. Like this is the millennials. It's the millennials that are screwing this up for all of us. Their parents are giving them the name Conor with 2 N. Now everybody writes and thinks that my name has 2 N's in it. It's an absolute. What's the sham, or I'm not sure what the word is that I'm looking for, but it's extremely important and very terrible. But Conor McDavid, you wrote a piece, and I love the headline. I love the photo also. That's or the drawing, I guess you could say. He's really good at hockey, but really bad at. And you were able to find a couple of things that Conor McDavid apparently is not good at, with some contributions from people that have been playing against him for the last 6 or 7 or even 8 years in the case of Zach Werenski. So what is Conor McDavid not good at? Yeah,
so this is really good news for all of us, because you watch him on the ice and he does these ridiculous things and you're like, he's not human. Well, on the other side of his life, he's a lot more moral than you think. He's not good at parking his car. He is not good with dealing with spiders. He gets very scared of them. He's not a morning person. He does not like waking up in the morning and having a nice chatty conversation and doing his hair. And he's also probably not good at cooking. That one was kind of funny because a bunch of his teammates were like, well, I've never seen him cook, so he has to be bad, especially Eric Grybo, who is the self-proclaimed best chef in the NHL. So he had some pretty strong thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't know how many like 19 or 20-year-old kids are really, are good cooks. But you got to talk to his billet dad too, which was cool, about this sort of this morning person thing, the director of media relations for the Erie Otters, where he starred for 3 years there in the Ontario Hockey League. So, I mean, you were able to get like, as a journalist, you got to get confirmation, I know, and confirm things with various sources. You were really able to do this with this morning show, this morning person thing, weren't you?
You know what? I'm gonna bet I'm not putting it out there that he's not a morning person until I have it like well sourced.
Right.
But no, it was one of those things where I just wanted to catch people from all phases of his life. I said, he's only been in Edmonton for 3 years now, or 2 years, 2.5. Let's find people who really know him and tell us who he is behind the ice. And one of the people who knows him best is his billet dad. They're actually still in touch. He comes and visits him a lot. And Conor is really great and stays in touch with the kids who he grew up with there. So it was just interesting kind of hearing that perspective of it, because even when Connor was there in Erie, everyone knew this is kind of a special superstar. So what was he like in that part of his life when he wasn't at the rink?
I think one of the most surprising revelations, as I've got a blind dog here in the Hockey Primetime studios about to knock our camera off kilter. Maisie, sorry about that.
That's quite the visual.
Yes, I sorry about that. I'm babysitting my mom's blind dog. Okay, so one more thing, and just another tidbit. He's apparently, and I was shocked by this because most of the guys that I know in the National Hockey League, and pretty much every pro athlete I've ever met, I've always been amazed by how good they are at like everything. But apparently he's not good at, as Connor McDavid, not good at other sports, at least according to his teammates.
Yeah, so I think part of this is like a wishful thinking of, we've only seen a very small sample size, so we're assuming he's not good. Apparently he's gotten very good at golf recently. He's always played, but has really upped his game this summer and is now doing really well. But you know that soccer juggling game that every guy plays, you know, before the game in the concourse? The European players are usually the best at it, and they're like, yeah, Connor's that good. Apparently his left foot is not great. One of his teammates, I think it was Alex DePrincat, who plays for the Blackhawks and now was with him and played with him in juniors, was like, yeah, like, I think I saw him play baseball once. I don't think he was great. And I think for them, the bar is just way higher, where Connor's so good at hockey that if he's not so good at something else, we'll just say he sucks at it.
Right. Hey, Emily, thanks for your time as always. Check out Emily's stuff at ESPN NHL, and some really good stuff and a great team that you guys have built there. I appreciate you making time for us. So keep up the great work.
Thanks, Connor. Have a good weekend.
That's Emily Kaplan. I'm Conor McKenna. And yeah, that's I love that idea. Apparently, so here's some other stuff that he's bad at. And check out the piece, though. Apparently, he's bad at video games. Connor McDavid, he's not good at UFC on PlayStation, according to Darnell Nurse. Alex DeBrincat says he's bad at NHL video games. And Brooks Orpik says that he never takes any time off. He's too hard of a worker. He's a workaholic, which I don't think his coaching, his coaches over the years would have a problem with. And the awkward fan photos as well, which is definitely one of my favorite Connor McDavid things, is that photo of him with that mom and dad in an airport where he looks like they're about to take him hostage or take him into custody. He's bad, or he's awkward at fan photos. That was Emily Emily Kaplan of ESPN. Emily Campbell works with CJAD. Steve Dangle. Steve Dangle is going to be joining us next. Let's talk Leafs. So the Leafs are in action tonight. Kind of an up and down. They had a great start to the season. They went on a dry run there, although a very difficult portion of their schedule going out on the West Coast and facing some good teams. And they're looking to get things back on track. Let's talk Leafs and the Eric Lindros Celebrity Hockey Classic with Steve Dangle joining Hockey Primetime next. right, welcome back. This is Hockey Primetime. My name is Conor McKenna. I'm the host of the show. You can watch us on the Facebook, and feel free to weigh in with your thoughts. If you've got questions, comments, or anything else like that, feel free to hit us up on Facebook. We've got the Toronto Maple Leafs playing tonight. They're in St. Louis. It's been an up-and-down road trip for them. A 7 o'clock start in St. Louis. That's, of course, a national game, like any Leafs game is on a Saturday. And with more on the Leafs, their road trip, and to find out what's going on with the man himself, Steve Dangle is on the line. You can see his stuff with Sportsnet. He does a variety of things there. He's also the host of the Steve Dangle podcast. Steve, how you doing?
No. Don't give me any of that. We need to get something out of the way right away. I heard you don't like Stranger Things.
You know what? Here's the thing, okay? It's not that I don't like Stranger Things.
Here we go.
I just don't think it's worthy of the effusive praise that it receives. Like it's good.
Hunter, I'm gonna hang up this phone if you don't acknowledge that Stranger Things is a great show.
It is, in many ways, it's a great show. I find that the kids are bad actors, and I also find that they're.
Oh my God. You're going to have to find a new Leafs guy.
Yeah, I'm sorry. All right, we're calling James Myrtle. All right, we're going to call James Myrtle right now.
Okay, no. We got to keep him off the radio. I'll stay on. I'll save you from Myrtle.
Okay, I appreciate that. And hey, listen, I've got the last episode to watch of season 2. It's a good show. The other thing that I find annoying is that I feel like the fans liked this in season 1, so let's cater to the fans and make the kid with the lisp and the stupid hair the main kid in this season. It's like, he's not a good kid. All these kids are they're
man. It's like what people like. It's like wrong, man. What I like is what's good, man.
All right, stop it. All right, the Eric Lindros Celebrity Hockey Classic. What was that?
Oh, that was amazing. Yeah, the Eric Lindros Celebrity Hockey Classic in support of Easter Seals. So Easter Seals is a charity that helps out kids with physical disabilities. And it just so happens when I was younger, I went to Easter Seals camp with my parents and sister. My sister has cerebral palsy as well as autism. She grew up with several disabilities, and Easter Seals was one of the many organizations that we kind of leaned on for a little bit of support. So I didn't hesitate to sign up for the tournament when I was asked by Sportsnet's Ken Reed, but there was one little problem in playing in the tournament is I'd never actually played organized hockey before, never once in my life. And, part of the reason for that was, my parents were kind of tied up, taking care of their special daughter as well as their bratty son. So it was great to finally get my first hockey games out of the way at this tournament and do it for a good cause.
How'd you do?
I fell down twice on my first shift, and then when I got back to the bench, I tripped over the bench and fell down again. But I didn't fall down for the rest of the tournament. I sent a pass to Dennis Marouk's skates. I made a clean pass in front. That was nice. I won 3 face-offs out of 6, and I even blocked a Gary Lehman shot, which I'm very proud of.
So
yeah.
Are you, you're playing center, so clearly your coach doesn't think you're a defensive liability.
No, they let me play center just for the face-offs, basically as a, because it was pretty much fantasy camp for me, and then I went right back to left pylon.
Who were you who impressed you the most? Which person on the ice did you find most impressive?
Oh my God, some of the Johnny Tryhards that were there just as fundraisers, but
yeah.
in terms of the alumni, Lindros has still got it. It was cool. John LeClaire fed him a pass for the goal, and when they got back to the bench, he goes, "I missed you." So it was pretty cool seeing the Legion of Doom, or 2/3 of it, get back together. But the guy who impressed me the most was my teammate throughout the whole day, Dennis Marouk. If you haven't heard the name, the guy scored 60 goals with the Capitals, and it kind of got forgotten because he did it the year Gretzky scored 92.
Huh.
Literally the worst year to have the best year of your career. But no, he was an excellent teammate, and he had pretty good wheels for the oldest alumni at the tournament. He was 62 years old. So he was great and really supportive having the worst player in the tournament on his team.
It's amazing to see like a former NHLer at 62 who can still rip, and it's one of the, I love seeing that. You scored 60 goals in the National Hockey League. Even if it was 30 years ago, chances are you're probably still pretty good at hockey. We're talking to Steve Dangle, host of the Steve Dangle podcast. You can see him and read his work at sportsnet.ca and a variety of different ways. All right, let's talk a little bit about the Leafs, who are in the midst of what's been kind of an up and down road trip. They had that great start to the season, and then they had a little bit of a tough stretch, and maybe are coming out of it right now. The one sort of consistent thing has been Austin Matthews. I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to be one of those who might suggest that this guy doesn't get enough credit, but he has certainly no sign of a sophomore slump. I mean, this is already, and it's amazing to see, one of the best players in the National Hockey League. How impressed have you been with him this year?
I think maybe the most impressed I've ever been with him, aside from the 4-goal game, which was a little bit impressive, was the second half of the game against the Kings. We're talking about a game that the Leafs didn't even show up to. No one marked it down on the calendar. They're down 3-0 after the first. They were down 5-0. Second half of a back-to-back, backup goalie in the net. And there was just one shift in the second period where Matthews said, all right, you bunch of bums, we're getting back into this game. Had a monster of a shift. The Kings couldn't get out from behind their own net, let alone their own blue line. And then I think it was the next shift, he draws the penalty shot call on Kopitar. Granted, it was a bit of a soft penalty shot, but regardless, he still had the breakaway, and it still probably would have led to a scoring chance. Scores on the penalty shot, and then it was either 1 or 2 shifts later, 3 seconds left in the game, or in the period. He's in the corner, sets up Morgan Riley with a beautiful pass, Leafs score, and all of a sudden they might just be back in this game. It was the biggest stretch of just putting his team on his back performance that I've seen him do. I've seen him be part of a strong team before. He was good throughout the playoffs. He was good all of last season, but it was the first time I saw him not just rise above the other team, but rise above his own teammates on a bad night.
And that's what you need. I mean, there's only so many guys like that in the National Hockey League, and the Leafs have one right now. They've got some other really good players too. I wanted to ask you about Mitch Marner, who's is been shuffled down and more up and down, but more down the lineup lately. What do you make of what's going on with him and this the struggle that he seems to be going through with Mike Babcock?
Yeah, I'm not too worried about Mitch Marner, to be honest. He needs stability is what he needs. He needs someone to calm him down, and putting him on the fourth line, I think, was an attempt at that. I don't think it's working, though. I think what Babcock needs to do is move him up in the lineup, maybe let him back onto the second line or the third line, whatever it may be. Because what I see with Mitch Marner when he gets out there is a tremendously skilled player, a tremendously fast player, who's doing way, way, way too much. Every single shift, he's out there trying to get off the fourth line. He's out there trying to have the shift of his life, and it's just not working for him. He needs to simplify his game, and for the love of God, he needs to get a goal. He's gotten so close a handful of times. I think when it changes for Mitch Marner, it's going to change very quickly.
He's a hell of a player. We know that, and we've seen it. And it would be nice. I mean, you can't have it all. And I don't know if any team, you never have it all happening at the same time. It seemed like Marner had that great start to the season a year ago, and Nylander kind of was a little bit slow. By the end of the year, they were both going, but it seemed like Nylander was sort of more consistent and was better maybe into the playoffs even too, although they were both pretty good. But when you've got 3 guys like that, and you do wonder, I mean, is there any kind of a sense? I hear people talking about the cap and how this year's such a big opportunity for the Leafs. How much of a question mark is it, the ability to keep this young nucleus of this team together long term in a salary cap league?
I don't think the question really lies with the young guys. Matthews is going to get his money because he's worth it. Nylander is going to get his money because he's worth it. The Marner negotiation might suck a little bit, but I mean, he's going to stay. I think he's worth it. The issue is the 3 big UFAs they got, and that's JVR, Bozak, and Leo Komarov. I keep trying to talk my way through it on the podcast. I've even tried to convince myself the Leafs could potentially keep 2 out of those 3 guys. It's just not going to happen. I think there's a pretty good chance they're going to lose all 3. But in that sense, you know, the Leafs are still rebuilding in a sense, even though they're, I guess, way ahead of schedule in a lot of people's eyes. I don't think that front office can justify losing 3 guys for nothing. So with that, I have a feeling there might be a move or 2 up their sleeve.
Weird though. I mean, if they're contending, like, do you mean before the deadline?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, they're not gonna trade a player who's going to be a UFA on July 1st,
right?
Sometime in June or at the draft. Now, what's that trade going to be? Great question. I have no idea. You would think it'd be blue line help, but I really don't know. I cannot see a situation. Well, okay, I could see one situation. The players take a haircut, and you know, when the season was just beginning, you heard James Van Riemsdyk already say, "I'd take a hometown discount." And I think after his first, what are we at, 14 games, the Leafs might be thinking even more of a discount because he's playing 13 or 14 minutes a night. That's not a $6 million player. I don't care how many goals he's scoring. You know, just his game on the other side of the puck. The Leafs are a mystery. You know, we went from the Dave Nonis era where they were leakier than a faucet. You know, we knew everything about that team. You know, everyone who wanted to talk to the media did. And now we're just kind of looking at the roster, and every little thing that seems confusing, there's just wild speculation about it because that's all we got. So all I got to go on is I look at the Leafs roster and I go, something has to give. But, you know, Lou Lamoriello's team is expectedly mum.
Yeah, it'd be weird. I just, you don't see it happen a lot. If they're, let's just say hypothetically that they are in second place in the division, because I don't know if anybody's catching Tampa Bay, when the trade deadline rolls around or when we start getting close to it, when you're trading away guys who are going to be UFAs, you're sort of usually, at least traditionally, you're trading those guys away to teams like the Leafs, like a team that is trying to beef up for the deadline, and meaning that you're not going to get, you might get futures, you'll get draft picks, you'll get a prospect or whatever, but the teams that are going to be looking to acquire those guys are not guys that I don't think are teams that are going to be looking to give roster players or NHL guys up to the Leafs. You know what I mean? So it seems almost inevitable that if the Leafs make those moves, that the team becomes weaker as a result, which that's a tough sell in any market, let alone like in Toronto, right?
Well, and now you're making the very good point that Jesse Blake, the producer of my podcast, made on the show. Like, you got to look, his argument, and I think it's a very good one, is you got to look at guys like Komarov, Bozak, and JVR. If you're not going to keep them, you need to look at them as buys. In a way, that's your playoff buy. You know, without spending a single pick. You got JVR, you got Bozak, you got Komarov. You know, you have this supposed surplus of guys. Well, if you have a surplus of guys, you don't go out and make silly moves. So maybe that's who they keep. I just think if there's a move out there for a defender that the Leafs can't say no to, that's the trade that they make. If that move doesn't present itself, then I see those guys just finishing their contract with the Leafs and then maybe moving on in the summer.
All right, Steve, I'll let you go. Thank you for your time, man. I really do appreciate it. And remember that, you know, just because everybody thinks Stranger Things is really good doesn't mean that it actually is necessarily.
Connor, you're in the upside down, buddy. You need to get out of it.
Oh, geez. All right. Thank you. That's Steve Dangle, host of the Steve Dangle podcast. Check out his work on Sportsnet, his fan reaction videos after every Leafs game, win or lose. Tonight, it's Toronto in St. Louis to take on the Blues. How about those surprising Blues? What a good start to the season they've had. We'll have more on that ahead of 7 o'clock. But coming up next, I want to talk Dallas Stars. They won the offseason, right? Remember? Made all those moves, brought in all those guys. Not the first time they've won the offseason, but things aren't going according to plan so far for the Stars. Scott Burnside is with the Dallas Stars, and he writes for their website, and he's covering the team, a longtime friend of the show, and one of the nicest guys in hockey. So we'll talk to Scott next. This is Hockey Primetime on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. Three, two, one. Hello. Welcome back. This is Hockey Primetime here on Sirius XM, NHL Network Radio, also streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. My name is Conor McKenna. I'm the host of the show. Laura Saba is the producer of the program every Saturday from 5 to 7. But you can find our show, our old episodes, our old segments at hockeyprimetime.com. So they will live on forever. Do they stay there forever? Yeah? So like even like from years ago we have stuff? Wow. Okay. I didn't know that. That must take up a lot of bandwidth. All right. So anyway, go check that out. And please check out our Facebook page. Give us a like on the Facebook, as my mother calls it. Follow us on Twitter at Hockey Primetime. Do we have a Snapchat? No Snapchat. Not yet, anyway. I don't have the Snapchat either. All right. So let's bring in our next guest. His name is Scott Burnside. New, although not as new, gig covering the Dallas Stars for the team's official website. The Stars right now 7-6 on the season, so it's been an up and down start with a lot of new faces. Scott Burnside is back on the show. Hello, Scott.
Hey, I didn't realize, I didn't think anything was forever. So good for you for having stuff that lasts forever. Good.
Yeah,
that's excellent. That's impressive.
Yeah, in perpetuity. It's like owning a burial plot in a graveyard. Those are the only two things. Yeah, with Scott Burnside. Hello, sir. Look, the Stars are 7-6, 6 regulation losses, which isn't great. And I know, I mean, I'm a big believer in this. If you're going to lose games, you got to lose some of them in overtime and shootout and bank those points, especially in a tough division like the Central. But tell me, as somebody, I wake up at 4 a.m. every day during the week. I don't get to watch a lot of Stars games that start a little bit later than I'm used to. What's been going on with the club so far this year?
Well, I mean, it's been interesting on a number of different fronts. Of course, when you start with all the new faces from Ken Hitchcock on down through Alexander Radulov, Mark Mathot, Martin Hansel, there's a lot of moving parts. And this team is just coming off a 5-game road trip, 11 days, 7 different cities. And I think if you'd said up until Thursday night's game in Winnipeg, you know what, it was probably you'd mark it in this just over into the successful ledger. But they played very poorly against Winnipeg, where basically, gave us 3 first-period goals and really were by far the second-best team on the ice on Thursday night. And so I think it's been a sobering part of this early part of the season for a Stars team that hasn't been very good on the road. Now they come home, and Ken Hitchcock said yesterday, listen, we're still treating this like a road trip, because they really didn't get much of a break. Arrived in Dallas at about 2:30 a.m. Friday morning, had a video meeting Friday afternoon, and now they're on the ice tonight against the Buffalo Sabres team that, certainly underachievers, but showing some signs of turning a corner. Then they get the Jets again on Monday. So this is a real telling stretch for a Stars team that they're now missing Martin Hansel and Brett Ritchie for tonight's game and Monday's game at least. And really a lot of youthful forwards that Ken Hitchcock is relying on to help provide some depth scoring beyond the big line of Jamie Benn, Tyler Seguin, and Alexander Radulov.
How are the fans liking Radulov? Here in Montreal, the fans fell in love with him quickly last year. Is he becoming a favorite there already at American Airlines Arena?
I think he has, although he's played his best hockey on this just recently completed road trip. He was terrific in games in Edmonton, Vancouver, and Calgary, really starting to pound the puck. And I think what we saw early on with the big line, and Ken Hitchcock took Radulov off that Ben Sagan trio for collectively about a game. So half of one of the first road games, I think it was in Denver, and then the start of the next game. But then they've played together other than that full time. And I think what you're seeing now is that the three of them have stopped trying to be nice to each other, right? I think both Ben and Sagan wanted Radulov to fit in, wanted him to get some goals. I think Radulov was the same way, wanting to show that he was a team player, often giving up scoring or shooting opportunities to make passing plays. So I think we've seen less of that, and I think that shows a higher degree of comfort for those three. And really, if those three aren't getting it done, and that is both the power play and that 5-on-5, it's really not getting done for the Dallas Stars, which is something that the team is going to have to address as they move forward.
They're averaging basically a goal and a half per game, those three guys, between the three of them, Ben Sagan and Radulov. I think it's in 19 of the 28 goals the Stars have gotten from forwards have come from those guys, which is awesome. But I guess you can make a case also is maybe a little bit concerning when you think of the scoring depth for the rest of the team. How much of a concern is it that they're as top heavy as they are?
Well, I think it is a concern, not yet in the red line. So I don't think, a scale of 1 to 10, it's 6 or so. But it's not going to take very long before it really is a kind of pull your hair out kind of problem, because you alluded to it. I mean, the Central is very packed. I mean, the Colorado Avalanche, a team that a lot of us imagine would already be, sort of firmly ensconced in 7th place, are playing much better. Semyon Varlamov has changed the complexion of that team, so they're right in the hunt. St. Louis is, I think, far exceeding early expectations. So we know now that this division is going to be what we thought, which is going to be very, very tight. So when you aren't getting depth scoring, and on those nights where your big group isn't going, then you have problems. And as you pointed out, when they lose in regulation. So you're not collecting points, and so that's problematic. And you've got guys, like, I think on paper this looks like a 4-line team that should be able to wear you down, both with their commitment to two-way play under Ken Hitchcock, but also with their talent. But Jason Spezza has 0 goals. Martin Hansel, who's out and won't return until Friday at the earliest, has 1 goal, and that's an empty netter. Devon Shores without a goal. Tyus Janmark scored the other night, and I think that was his first in 9 games. They've got a lot of young players. Jamel Smith has been very good, rookie. Remy Ellie, they just brought up Jason Dickinson. But, I mean, let's be realistic. There are lots of young players scoring in the NHL. The Dallas Stars' young players are not scoring as of yet. So we're going to find out, I would think, these 2 games, Saturday, Monday against Buffalo and Winnipeg, loom large for a team that might be excused for having a little lower energy level. So I think it's going to be real interesting to see how the team comes out tonight and then how they follow up against a very, very good. I was so impressed with Winnipeg the other night. Connor Hellebuck, his steady goaltending suddenly makes them a real force, not just in the Central, but I think in the West overall.
It's amazing, isn't it? And I know, I mean, that's a franchise that you're familiar with from your days in Atlanta, but goaltending has always, since they were the Atlanta Thrashers, been a problem. It's incredible what it can do, and I'm seeing it here in Montreal. When you have bad goaltending, when Carey Price is not good, the Canadians are awful. I mean, this team has had question marks in goal for the last 15 years or even longer than that. I mean, it's amazing, and it's incredible what a little stability in goal can do, isn't it?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And, we'll see. I mean, Connor Hellebuck had a chance last year to be the number 1 goaltender, couldn't seize the moment. Everyone, when Steve Mason comes in, the assumption is if the goaltending problem gets corrected, it's corrected by Steve Mason, and that hasn't been the case. It's still a very small sample size for Connor Hellebuck. And if he can continue to provide the consistent play that he's shown, Paul Maurice said, listen, it's not the spectacular saves. It's the saves that if you don't make them, we're not going to be happy. Those are the saves that he's consistently making. He was very good against Dallas the other night, but I don't know that there's a save that sticks out as, oh my goodness, that was a game changer. And even when the Stars made it 3-2, there was never this sort of sense that the Jets were cracking or that Connor Hellebuck was going to crack, and he didn't do it. And the goaltending issue, has been an issue in Dallas for the last 2 or 3 years. And Ben Bishop has been good to very good, but the defense still hasn't caught up to what Ken Hitchcock would like to be. And you mentioned Atlanta goaltending. It's interesting. Kari Lehtinen gets the start against Buffalo tonight, and he's coming off his first win of the year, a really pivotal road win in Calgary on last Friday. So it'll be interesting to see if he can back that up with a second straight consistent performance, because the Stars certainly need that now, especially as we talked about when maybe the rest of the lineup isn't going in full gear yet.
How's it? How are you enjoying living in Texas, living in the Dallas area? How's that going for you so far, Scott?
So far, so good. I have not been kicked off the team charter as of yet, so that's so good news, I suppose. And it's interesting when you used to doing things as I did for a long time at ESPN, which is you sort of you cherry pick your stories, and maybe you're in Washington and maybe you're in Pittsburgh or wherever you are. You miss the nuances of what happens on a daily basis and the shifting of the lines. And, for me, it's been interesting to watch, for instance, what Ken Hitchcock has tried to do to help Jason Spezza. Move the natural center to the right side because it was better in his structure. Now he's back at center now with Martin Hanselhurt. But just that sort of daily look at how a team tries to become a team and how they try and smooth out the bumps, especially early in the season. So it's been an ongoing education for me. I'm not at the top of the class yet, but I'm trying to keep my eyes open. So it's been fun so far.
Follow him on Twitter at Overtime Scott B. That's Scott Burnside. Scott, thanks for your time. We appreciate it, man.
Anytime.
There you go. So that's Scott Burnside. I'm Conor McKenna, and this is Hockey Primetime. What are the Stars doing tonight? They're hosting the Buffalo Sabres. That's an 8 o'clock Eastern start if you're in the Central Time Zone, which the Stars are, at least I believe. That is a 7 o'clock start. Coming up next, take a couple of questions. I want to talk a little bit about the St. Louis Blues. If you've got any questions, you can hit us up on the Facebook or on Twitter or wherever the heck else. I guess you could shoot me an email, but you probably shouldn't. Don't do that. So yeah, back to wrap things up next. Ahead of the game, we've got for you tonight, we've got the Winnipeg Jets hosting the Montreal Canadiens. The coverage of that will begin in about 10 minutes' time. You'll have to put up with me in the meantime, though. This is Hockey Primetime here on SiriusXM, NHL Network Radio, and streaming live on Facebook Live, on Periscope, and at hockeyprimetime.com. Anything else? Is that it? Terrible. Probably should have done that a little bit earlier. Just had the idea of, like, I don't know, maybe that guy asked a question, maybe other people. Live Periscope users, if you have any listener questions, any questions about anything at all that you'd like to get in, there's still a minute or two to do it. You can write them right there in the comments tab. This is the typing motion here on Facebook, or just tweet them to me, or those are the only two ways really to do it. Okay.
Don't be texting or emailing. But yeah, we should talk about the Blues next week too, because they are kind of fascinating. And
the question is, well, I mean, there's at least one Blues fan listening or watching, so that's good. But you know what we should do is the Devils.
We are, actually. I lined somebody up for last week and then pushed them to this week.
Devils are very good.
It was a kind of a last minute change to next week, but I do have
who?
Jesse Spector.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
All right. That's true. Yeah.
He covered the NHL for a very long time, and now he's writing specifically Devils things. So,
for who? NHL.com?
I believe so.
Cool.
And also he attends like the tri-state area games and writes them for other publications.
That's a good place to live. If you need to freelance hockey stuff, you know, especially if you have a car.
Exactly.
Okay. Three, 2, 1. Hello. Welcome back. Final moments of the show. This is Hockey Primetime. Well, we got about 5 minutes or so, and we're going to try to make those minutes count ahead of coverage of the Canadiens and the Jets. So that's coming up in just a few minutes here on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio. And you can always find old episodes of the show at hockeyprimetime.com. You can also you can stream the show live there. If you're, if you're not a SiriusXM person, then you can go to hockeyprimetime.com. It's radio for the people. All you need is an internet connection, and you can listen to the show live at hockeyprimetime.com. My name is Conor McKenna. I am the host of the show, and the show is winding down, as we mentioned. We do still have time to get to listener questions, if there are any, and I'll answer as many as I can. Let's start here. Fergie writes, who's faster, Connor McDavid or Paul Byron? I don't know. I would say that maybe top speed for Byron might be faster. Paul Byron, very fast player for the Montreal Canadiens. But the ability to do things with the puck at high speed, definitely you got to give the edge to Connor McDavid. Or maybe I'd put it to you this way. I think McDavid's faster with the puck, and I think Byron might be faster without the puck. And this is based on nothing other than me basically pulling this answer out of my rear end. Full stop here. I mean, there's no scientific basis for any of this. I know that McDavid hit like 40 kilometers per hour when he scored that goal in the first game of the season. He is incredible. And he's had a couple of he's had highlight reel goals and highlight reel assists, but up and down season. I mean, geez, you want to talk about weird storylines? What's going on out there in Edmonton this year? A lot of headlines and a lot of attention has been devoted in this country to the Montreal Canadiens. I think with good reason. There's a lot of Habs fans out there. They are a big time team, one of the most valuable teams, one of the most popular teams in the sport. But what's happened to Edmonton is downright shocking. I mean, they've been just as bad as the Canadiens. And the differences. I mean, Edmonton had some expectations. People were calling on them to win the Stanley Cup this year, and it certainly doesn't look like that's going to happen. In fact, it looks kind of like they might not make the playoffs, but still a lot of time to go. Tommy on Twitter asks, when you get a chance, have you talked about the Blues yet? Curious about your thoughts on Pietrangelo, Schwartz, and a banged-up team having a great first month. And it's true. That's been a great storyline so far this year, is what's happened with the St. Louis Blues, who looked so banged up. What were they missing? Like 4 of their top 9 forwards or something to start the season? But what's happened? Jaden Schwartz looks like a superstar. He's played like a superstar for the first month of the season. Now, this is a guy who's really emerged as one of the best forwards in the game, at least so far this season. So he's been outstanding. You've got Alex Pietrangelo on the back end, and it's been interesting to see too, because of all the criticism of Kevin Shattenkirk. I find this to be sort of a fascinating story, just because of
1 minute.
The fact that Shattenkirk looked kind of bad as a Washington Capital, and some suggested it was addition by subtraction that the Blues lost him. Well, geez, I mean, the Rangers aren't looking very good with Kevin Shattenkirk out there, and the Blues are chugging right along, even without the Ken Hitchcock, with the Ken Hitchcock era being over. So that's been a cool storyline, and we'll talk some more Blues next week on the show. We will also talk some New Jersey Devils. It's been a lot of fun hanging out with you this week. Thanks to Rob Conway, who's been our technical producer to Sirius XM NHL Network Radio. Thank you to Laura Saba, who's the producer of this show here. Thank you to our executive producer, Sam Wu, I should say. And don't forget to check out our podcast page, as we mention all the time, at hockeyprimetime.com. We will talk to you 1 week from today. Enjoy the games tonight and have a great rest of the weekend, everybody.